All right, ready to dive into some DIY HomeKit? We're going to be building some cool smart home gadgets using ESP32s.
Yeah, it's like taking your smart home into your own hands.
Exactly. And luckily, we have the perfect guide for this. Kim Peters.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
His blog posts are basically step-by-step instructions.
Yeah. He's considered the expert in ESP32s and Apple HomeKit.
Yeah, making it easy to understand for, anyone, not just like the hardcore coders.
Yeah, he really wants to share this knowledge with everyone. You can really feel that passion in his posts.
All right, so before we go any further, what exactly is an ESP32?
So an ESP32 is basically like a tiny computer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a microcontroller. And it can connect to Wi-Fi, control things like lights and motors, and basically, it's the brains of your project.
So it's like the brains of the project. And to start off, we're connecting it to an LED light.
Right.
Why start with something so simple?
Well, it's like the hello world of electronics. It's the simplest thing you can do to just kind of get a grasp of how these microcontrollers work and how to make them talk to HomeKit.
Got it.
And then from there, you can build anything.
Okay, so like start simple and then go crazy.
Right.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, LEDs. The source material mentions something about polarity, and I have a feeling that's important.
Yeah. So an LED is what's called a diode. And a diode is, it basically only lets electricity flow in one direction. So it's like a one-way street for electricity.
Okay.
So it matters which way you connect it. You have the positive side, which is called the anode, and then the negative side, which is called the cathode.
Okay, so how do we know which side is which?
Well, usually the longer leg of the LED is the positive side,
All right.
and the shorter one is the negative.
Okay,
Yeah, so make sure you double check that before you connect anything.
got it. Pay attention to those legs. Now let's get into the chips themselves. The sources mentioned all different kinds. ESP32, ESP32C2, ESP32S3, like a whole family of these things. Do we need to know all the different types?
I mean, not to get started, it's kind of like picking the right tool for the job.
Okay.
Each one has its own strengths. Like the ESP32C6 is very energy efficient.
Oh.
It uses what's called RISC-V architecture,
Right.
which is perfect for battery-powered gadgets.
So if we wanted to build something that didn't have to be plugged in all the time, that'd be the one to go for.
Exactly. And then you have something like the ESP32S3, which is more of like the multitasker.
Okay.
It has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, so you could even control it with your phone, even if it's not connected to Wi-Fi.
Okay. Lots of options to choose from. But before we even pick out our chip, what other hardware do we need?
So the basic setup is actually pretty simple.
Okay.
You need a development board, which is basically like a little platform for your ESP32 chip. Makes it easy to connect wires and components. And then you need some DuPont wires, which are those, colorful jumper wires that you'll see in a lot of electronic projects.
Got it.
And then, of course, you need the LED itself.
Okay. So it sounds like I might have some of this stuff laying around.
Yeah, probably.
But what about software? Do we need to be like expert coders to do any of this?
Not really, no. Akim has instructions in his blog posts, and he links to all the code that you need. And so you'll be working with GitHub. It's like basically like a library of code. You'll also be working with Docker, which is a way to create like a little virtual computer on your computer just for these ESP32 projects.
Oh, okay. A virtual computer. So we don't have to like install a bunch of complicated stuff on our actual computer.
Yeah, exactly. Makes it a lot easier.
Very cool.
And then you'll also be using what's called the Espressif IDF framework,
Right.
which is basically like a toolbox full of code and functions for ESP32s. So it takes care of a lot of the complicated stuff for you.
So Akim has tried to make this as painless as possible. I'm feeling a little less intimidated
You
now.
should. That's the goal. And yeah, he walks you through connecting to the HomeKit app, which is probably the most exciting part.
Oh, yeah, that must be really cool. So can we talk about that moment when you actually see it pop up in your HomeKit app?
Yeah, it's pretty magical. So
Okay.
basically, you scan a QR code that's provided in the blog post, and then HomeKit should just recognize your device.
Oh, wow.
You might get a message saying it's an uncertified accessory because you built it yourself,
Oh, okay.
but it's totally safe to add.
Okay, good. So I build this LED, I connect it to HomeKit, and then what else can we do with these ESP32s?
Well, that's a story for part 2
Yeah.
of our deep dive. Let's just say there's a lot more we can do than just blinking an LED.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, like smart sensors, custom buttons, maybe even a weather station. So yeah, stay tuned.
lots more to come. We'll be back with part 2 after a short break. Welcome back to our DIY HomeKit Deep Dive with ESP32s, of course. Last time, We covered like the basics, right? We
Uh,
talked about iComputers and LEDs and all the hardware and software we need.
right.
But you were hinting at some seriously cool projects.
Yes.
Beyond just, blinking lights. I'm ready to hear more.
Okay. So remember how we were talking about the ESP32C6?
Mm-hmm.
The power saving champ?
Yes.
That makes it perfect for something like a smart plant monitor.
Ooh, tell me more.
Yeah. So, you've got a tiny little sensor in your plant's pot. It's monitoring the moisture levels.
Okay.
And when things get dry, it sends a notification straight to your HomeKit app.
So no more like accidentally killing my plants
Right.
by forgetting to water them.
Exactly. And you can even take it a step further and actually connect a pump to your ESP32.
Oh, wow.
So that when the sensor detects dry soil, it waters the plant automatically.
Wait, hold on. So I can automate the watering?
Yep.
That's amazing. But what if I want to like have more control than just watering?
Then you could do something like custom HomeKit buttons. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Basically shortcuts to actions in your HomeKit.
Okay.
So, for example, you could have a welcome home scene in HomeKit. And when you press the button, it turns on your lights, adjusts the thermostat, maybe even plays some music.
No, that's so cool.
Yeah. And it's really helpful, especially for people with mobility challenges, to have that kind of like personalized control.
Right. Plant monitors, custom buttons. This. Awesome. But I have a confession. I'm kind of fascinated by the idea of a security system, like a DIY security system. Is that something we can do with this?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You
Yeah.
could have motion sensors that trigger alerts in HomeKit if someone's, lurking around.
Okay.
Or door and window sensors that let you know if they've been opened unexpectedly.
So I could actually get a notification on my phone if someone, tries to break in.
Exactly.
That's so cool. But honestly, building a whole security system sounds kind of intimidating.
I mean, it sounds more complicated than it is.
Akim's blog and his GitHub repositories have really detailed instructions, even for complex projects.
What?
And the online DIY community is really supportive. There's forums, groups where you can ask questions and get help.
Right, so it's not like I'd be doing this completely on my own.
Exactly.
But let's be real, no DIY project is perfect.
True.
What are some of the challenges we might run into?
I think one of the first hurdles for a lot of people is just setting up the development environment,
Yeah.
getting all the software tools installed correctly.
Yeah, that sounds kind of like a headache.
It can be.
Any tips for avoiding that?
I mean, Akim's blog posts are really helpful. They have step-by-step instructions.
Okay.
But if you get stuck, like I said, the online community is there to help.
All right, so setup can be tough. What else?
Well, sometimes you run into bugs in your code.
Oh, right, like errors.
Yeah, basically. And, finding and fixing those can be a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, I don't really like puzzles. So what do we do if we hit a bug?
Well, again, the online community can help a lot. Just, sharing your code with someone who has experience.
Okay.
And seeing if they can spot the problem.
So the community is really key.
Yeah.
Okay, but what about like the hardware itself? I'm picturing myself like fumbling with wires, accidentally, short-circuiting something.
I mean, you definitely want to be careful.
Okay.
Double check your connections. Use a multimeter to test the voltage levels. Don't be afraid to, consult circuit diagrams and schematics.
Okay, solid advice. But even if we make a mistake, it's part of the process, right?
Exactly.
We learn from our mistakes.
Oh.
Okay, so we've talked about challenges, but what about security and privacy? Should we be thinking about that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
When you're building your own devices, you're responsible for their security. So, strong passwords, keep your software up to date, and be mindful of the data your devices are collecting.
So it's not just about building something cool. We need to be responsible about it too.
Right. Like if you're building a security system with cameras, you need to make sure that video feed is encrypted and that only authorized people have access to it.
Right, that makes sense. But back to the fun stuff. Do you have any advice for someone who's feeling inspired to start their own HomeKit adventure with ESP32s?
I would say just jump in. Don't be intimidated.
Okay.
Embrace the learning curve, use the online community, and have fun.
I love that. Fun is key. But before I run off to build a HomeKit controlled disco ball, which totally sounds like something I would do,
It's on my list.
is there anything else we should cover?
Actually, yes. Power management.
Ah, right. Especially if we're talking about battery-powered devices. We want those to last.
Exactly. And even for devices that are plugged in, optimizing power consumption is good for the environment and can save you money on your electricity bill.
So how do we make sure our ESP32 creations are energy efficient?
Well, first, you want to pick the right chip.
Okay.
Like we said, the ESP32C6 is really good for low-power applications.
Right.
But you also want to optimize your code.
Oh, yeah.
Minimizing operations, putting the chip to sleep when it's not actively doing something, and also don't underestimate the hardware,
Right.
like using efficient LEDs, low-power sensors, things like that.
So it's like a combination of picking the right hardware, the right code, and designing smart circuits.
Yeah,
Okay. It's a lot less magic and a lot more science.
a little bit of both.
True. But speaking of expanding our horizons, is there anything else we can do with these ESP32s and HomeKit? Like, can we integrate them with other smart home platforms?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes.
Really?
You can. Even though those platforms are usually seen as competitors, ESP32s can actually kind of bridge the gap.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So with the right code and configuration, you could have a single device controlled by like both Siri and Alexa.
Wow. So I could build like a smart light switch that I can control with my iPhone and my Echo Dot and my Google Nest Hub?
Exactly.
That's incredible. But
Yeah.
that sounds really complex.
It is more complex, but that's where the power of ESP32s comes in.
Right.
They're versatile, open source, so you can really push the boundaries.
So we're not just building cool stuff for our own homes. We're kind of breaking down the walls
Yeah.
between all these different platforms.
Exactly.
That's awesome. This is so inspiring. But should we also be thinking about any downsides? Like ethically?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's important to be aware of the impact. Like if you're building a device that collects data, you need to be careful about how it's stored and used.
Right. Don't want to accidentally create a privacy nightmare.
Right.
So responsible DIY, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about amazing projects, challenges, power management, cross-platform stuff, even ethical considerations. Anything else before we move on?
Oh.
Okay, so we've talked about all the possibilities, the potential downsides, everything. But now I want to see this in action. What are some real projects people have made with ESP32s and HomeKit?
Well, you know how we were talking about smart gardens before? Let's take that idea a step further. Imagine, like, a network of sensors all over your garden,
Oh, wow.
each one powered by an ESP32. They're monitoring moisture, temperature, light levels.
It's like a constant health checkup for all my plants.
Exactly. And all that data is sent to your HomeKit app, so you can see, like, how happy your plants are in real time.
That's incredible. But what about actually, like, watering them? Can we automate that too?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We talked about connecting pumps to ESP32s, right? So you can use that to create an automatic watering system.
Oh, that's amazing. So my plants will never be thirsty again. What if I want to do something a little more adventurous? Like, what about weather forecasting?
Ooh, you want to be a meteorologist.
Yeah, why not?
You could totally build a DIY weather station with an ESP32, like with sensors to measure temperature, humidity, wind speed, even rainfall.
So I could get, like, super accurate weather information just for my area.
Yep. And you can use that information to make decisions about, like, when to water your plants, when to harvest your veggies, even when to have a barbecue.
Okay, I'm convinced. A weather station is definitely happening. But can we take this data even further? Can we, like, share it with other people?
Yeah, some DIY weather stations can actually connect to online weather services, so you can contribute to, like, a larger network of weather data.
That's awesome. I love that. So it's not just for me. It's for, like, citizen science.
Right.
What about something just for fun?
Well, some people have built HomeKit-controlled disco balls.
Wait, seriously? A disco ball?
Yeah. The ESP32 controls a motor that spins the disco ball. You can control the speed, direction, everything right from your HomeKit app.
Oh my gosh, I'm doing that. That's amazing. What about something a little more nostalgic, like for retro gaming fans?
Well, there are also people who have built HomeKit-compatible arcade cabinets.
What? No way?
Yeah, so you can play all those classic games like Pac-Man or Donkey Kong, all controlled through HomeKit.
That's incredible. The possibilities really are endless.
They are, and that's the beauty of it. It's not just about following instructions. It's about coming up with your own ideas and experimenting and pushing the limits.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the big things you want people to remember?
I think the biggest one is that this stuff is really accessible now. Anyone can do this.
Yeah, Akim's resources make it so much easier to get started.
And also, don't forget about the DIY community. It's full of helpful people who are always willing to share their knowledge.
Absolutely. The forums and groups are so valuable.
And finally, just remember to be curious, be willing to learn, and don't be afraid to experiment.
That's great advice. This has been such an inspiring conversation. I can't wait to start building my own HomeKit gadgets. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It was my pleasure. And to everyone listening, happy automating.